This is your lecture over chapter 1. This is just going to be kind of an intro to this class, and it should be a little bit of a review because it is going to tie right into what we did on lab on Monday. So this should be a pretty quick lecture for you guys. So the first thing we talk about in chapter 1 is what this class is all about, and this is of course anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is going to be the study of the structure and shape of the body and its parts. We use observation to see the sizes and relationships of those parts. Physiology is going to be the study of how the body and its parts actually work and function, and oftentimes how all of those parts work and function together. We're going to have 6 different levels of structural organization within the body that are going to go from smallest to largest. Our first level of organization is going to be atoms. We know that all matter are made of atoms, therefore we have to be as well. Our atoms are going to build into cells. Our cells are going to make up our tissues. Tissues are going to make up our organs. Organs are going to make up our organ systems. And then, of course, all those organ systems are going to tie in together to make up the organism. So now we're going to do a little bit of an organ system overview. This class, essentially each week we will be covering a different system in the body. So these next few slides will kind of give you a little bit of insight as to what each week of this class will look like. So for your first chapter, don't feel like you need to know everything from all of the other chapters. I just need you to know the basic things that are here on the slides about each body system. So the first one we're going to talk about is the integumentary system. This is going to form the external covering of the body, right? This is our skin. It's going to include our hair and our fingernails. The point in this system is primarily to waterproof and protect the body. It's going to cushion and protect our deeper tissues from injury. It is also going to help us with synthesis of vitamin D. We're going to do that with the help of sunlight. And we can also excrete salts and perspiration. It's going to help regulate our body temperature. And it's going to be the location of those nerve receptors that we're going to talk about later when we talk about the nervous system. Our next system we're going to cover is going to be the skeletal system. That's going to consist of our bones, cartilage, ligaments, and joints. The purpose of the skeletal system is going to be to provide muscle attachment points. Those muscles are going to act like levers to help our body move around. It is going to help protect our vital organs in some case, like how our rib cage wraps around and protects our heart and lungs. It is also going to be the site of blood cell formation that takes place in our spongy bones. We will talk a lot more about that when we actually talk about the skeletal system. And we also store minerals. You hear all the time that you have to drink calcium for your bones, and that is because we store calcium in our bones, and then we can use it for other important processes that we need it for in other organ systems, like the cardiovascular system. The next system we'll talk about is the muscular system. This is going to be a lot like the skeletal system, right? Here we are going to just talk about the muscles, how they contract and shorten, what their names are, and we know that in synergy with those bones, the muscular system is going to allow our body to move around. We will also be talking about the nervous system. Our nervous system is essentially our control system for the body, right? It's going to consist of the brain, the spinal cord, the nerves, and the sensory receptors. It's going to respond to internal and external stimuli. Those sensory receptors are going to detect changes in either those internal or external environments, and then messages are going to be sent to the central nervous system to respond to the stimuli that it is receiving. We're also going to cover the endocrine system. It's going to secrete chemical molecules called hormones. Hormones have a lot of really important functions in our body. They are involved in growth, reproduction, use of nutrients. We have a whole lot of endocrine glands that we will cover. Some of those glands are going to include the pituitary gland, the thyroid and parathyroid, adrenal glands, thymus, pancreas, the pineal gland, and of course the ovaries and testes also will be covered under these glands. We will talk a whole lot about the cardiovascular system because it is so very important. This is going to include the heart and blood vessels. The heart is obviously going to pump our blood. The vessels are going to transport that blood around to all of our tissues. The reason why we need this to happen is because the blood transports oxygen and carbon dioxide. It is also going to transport nutrients and hormones. So it's very, very important. Blood is also going to contain our white blood cells and chemicals that provide us with protection from foreign invaders, right? Like pathogens and things like that. We will also cover the lymphatic system. This is going to include our lymphatic vessels, our lymph nodes, and our lymphoid organs. This is going to complement the cardiovascular system by returning those leaked fluids that we pull back into the bloodstream. Lymph nodes and other lymph node organs are going to help us clean our blood. So that is one of the primary purposes of this. It is also going to be the home of our white blood cells, which are going to be very involved in immunity. In about a month and a half, we'll start talking about the respiratory system. That's going to include the nasal passages, the larynx, the trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs. Gases are going to be exchanged with the blood through the air sacs in the lungs. This is vitally important because we have to have that oxygen to make all of our tissues function. And then it is also going to remove the carbon dioxide from our body. We will talk about the digestive system. This is going to include the mouth, esophagus, stomach, small and large intestines, all of the accessory organs. The purpose of this is just to break down food so that we can absorb nutrients from that food into our blood and eliminate all of the indigestible materials that we don't need out of our body. We will talk about the urinary system. This is one of my favorite systems. It is going to include the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. Its purpose is to eliminate nitrogenous waste. It is going to maintain our acid-base balance. It's okay if you don't know what that is yet. We will spend a lot of time on it, and you will definitely know what it is by the time that we're done. It is going to regulate water and electrolyte balance and help regulate normal blood pressure. The last unit we're going to cover is going to be about the reproductive system. For males, this is going to include the testes, scrotum, penis, accessory glands, and the duct systems. We know that the testes produce sperm, and the duct system is going to carry that sperm to the exterior. For females, it is going to include the ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus, and vagina. The ovaries are going to produce eggs, and the uterus is going to provide the site for the development of that fetus. So we're also going to, in this chapter, talk about how there are certain things that have to happen in order for life to keep going. So these are necessary life functions, essentially. One of those is maintaining boundaries. So we have to have boundaries. Oftentimes, this is our skin. This is going to separate the inside from the outside. We also need movement. We need movement to get around, but we also need movement within our body. We need to be able to move the oxygen and the carbon dioxide and the nutrients from our food and all of that around to different tissues within the body to be able to get energy from it, to be able to do everything that we need to do. Responsiveness is also going to be necessary for life. We're going to have to be able to sense changes and react to them. We are going to have to be able to break down and absorb nutrients somehow. And we have to be able to take part in the metabolic process. So metabolism is going to be all the chemical reactions within the body. This is going to help us break down food and turn it into energy and all of those kinds of things. And we have to be able to do that to keep going. Also necessary for life, we have to be able to excrete waste, and we have to be able to grow, essentially. Hormones are going to be able to, they're going to play a major role in the growth process, and we will talk a lot more about that later. So our main survival needs are going to be nutrients. These are going to be the chemicals we use for energy and cell building. These are going to include carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, vitamins, and minerals. We will talk a lot more about this next week and maybe a little bit the week after. Oxygen also, we need this for the chemical reactions that take place in our body. That's why oxygen is so very important. Oxygen is made available by the cooperation of the respiratory and cardiovascular systems working in synergy. We also need water. You've definitely heard before that 60 to 80% of our body is water. It's going to be the most abundant chemical in the human body. It's going to provide the fluid base for body secretions and excretions, and we just absolutely have to have it. We also have to maintain a normal body temperature. Below normal body temperature, our chemical reactions are going to slow down and sometimes stop, and we have to have those chemical reactions happen to keep going. If our body temperature gets too high, it can actually make the chemical reactions that happen in our body proceed too rapidly, and that can also be a major problem. One we don't think about very often is that for our survival, we are also very sensitive to pressure. So the atmospheric pressure, or if we're underwater, the water pressure, whatever it is, has to be appropriate for gas exchange, or we are not able to take in that oxygen and do all of those chemical reactions either. So a whole lot of the things that we do, you'll find out as we go through the physiology, really does come down to chemistry. Don't let that scare you, because we will definitely ease into it. But yes, most of our life processes are very chemistry dependent. So the next thing this chapter is going to talk about is the language of anatomy. We talked a whole lot about this in lab, so I'm going to kind of fly through this a little bit. We talked about anatomical position. That is going to be the standard body position that is used to avoid confusion when we are talking about the body. We have lots of pictures of this in the textbook, but essentially what you're doing is you're standing erect, your feet are parallel, your arms are hanging at your side, and your palms are always facing outward with your thumbs pointing away from the body. This becomes very important when you're doing things like surgery and whatnot, because the anatomical terms that we use to describe the body only really work if the body is in this position, or at least thought of as being in this position. I put a few tables in here for you all to study. The video that we had for lab, that pop-up biology video, was really, really a great study tool. I would suggest just going over that pop-up biology video a few times, because I really like the way that illustrates it. But here's also a table for people that learn that way. Definitely know these terms like superior, inferior, anterior, and posterior. Those will be things that you have to know. Also, all of these, like medial, which is going to go towards the midline of the body, lateral is going to go away from the midline of the body, proximal is going to be close to the origin of the body part, right? So my shoulder would be proximal while my wrist was distal, because it is further away from the origin of the attachment point of a body part. Also know the difference between superficial and deep. That will be really important when we start talking about muscles and wounds and things like that. I put this little picture in here for you as well. These are also important words for you to know, and your textbook goes into a whole lot more detail about each of these, but essentially they're all just positions on the body. That acromial process there on the shoulder is a really, really important one for you to know, because that is, a lot of these are reference points. So like whenever you're giving injections, you're looking for that acromion process. Whenever you are administering different medicines and doing different things, you need to know these areas, and that is why this is important. So another thing we talked about, and we did this with the gummy bears in lab, so I don't feel like we need to go too deep into it, but the body planes and sections. This is definitely something that you will see again on a test at some point, because it is important for when we are looking at slides and things and cross sections of the body. You need to know how those cross sections were sliced to really have a good idea of what you were looking at. So a sagittal section is going to divide the body or organ into a right and a left part. A median or a mid-sagittal section is going to divide the body into equal left and right parts. So the main distinction there is equal, right? A frontal or coronal section is going to divide the body into anterior and posterior, and a transverse or cross section is going to divide the body into superior and inferior parts. The body is going to have two internal primary cavities. That's going to be dorsal and ventral. Body cavities, their whole purpose is to provide protection to the organs within them. You will need to kind of loosely know the organs that are contained in the different body cavities. So the dorsal body cavity is then going to be broken down into two subdivisions. You're going to have a cranial cavity that's going to house the brain. It's going to be protected by the skull. And then you're also going to have the spinal cavity. That's going to house the spinal cord, and it is going to be protected by the vertebrae. The ventral body cavity is going to have two subdivisions separated by the diaphragm. Definitely know that they are separated by the diaphragm. That will come up again. Those two sections are going to be the thoracic cavity and the abdominal pelvic cavity. So the thoracic cavity is going to be superior to the diaphragm. It's going to house the heart, lungs, and other organs. It is going to have the mediastinum, which is the central region that is going to house the heart, the trachea, and the other organs. So within the thoracic cavity that's out here, then we have the mediastinum that is closer in. It is going to be protected by the rib cage. We're also going to have the abdominopelvic cavity. This cavity is going to be inferior to the diaphragm. The superior abdominal cavity is going to contain the stomach, liver, and other organs, while the inferior pelvic cavity is going to contain primarily the reproductive organs, the bladder, and the rectum. The abdominopelvic cavity has subdivisions. It has 4 quadrants, which then are separated into 9 regions. The reason why we care is because depending on where pain is radiating from, we can know what is causing it. So for instance, if you have right lower quadrant pain or epigastric pain, we will know which organ without doing a scope or anything at all. We can frequently know which organ is the problem organ and get you treated. So it can be really, really important in like triage situations in the emergency room and stuff like that. Our other body cavities are going to include the oral and digestive cavities, the nasal cavity, the orbital cavities, which of course is where your eyes live, and your middle ear cavities. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is homeostasis. This is so important for our body. We have to have relatively stable internal conditions. So homeostasis is really a dynamic state of equilibrium or balance. It's necessary for normal body functioning and to sustain life. The main controlling systems of our homeostasis are going to be the nervous system and the endocrine system. The cardiovascular and respiratory system also play a huge role in our homeostasis. And a homeostatic imbalance is just a disturbance to that homeostasis. So all homeostatic control mechanisms are going to have at least 3 components: a receptor, a control center, and an effector. A receptor is going to respond to changes in the environment or that stimuli that we were talking about. It's going to send information to the control center. The control center is going to analyze the information, determine the appropriate response, and the effector is going to provide a means for the response to the stimulus. So that is almost all I have. This is our last slide. I want to talk about feedback mechanisms because they're very important when we're talking about homeostatic responses. We have 2 different kinds of feedback. We have positive and we have negative. Positive feedback is really rare in the human body, but it does happen. Positive feedback is going to increase the original stimulus to push the variable further. A good example of this is like breastfeeding. So the more a baby breastfeeds, the more breast milk is produced. So the more you get that reinforcement, the more that you're going to get that response. What we see more often in the human body is negative feedback. This is going to include most of our homeostatic control mechanisms. It is essentially an off switch, which is going to shut off the original stimulus or reduce its frequency, essentially, or its magnitude. And this is going to work a lot like a household thermostat, and we will start to conceptualize that a whole lot more as we're working through these body systems, and you'll kind of see what I mean. That is all that I have. As always, if you have any questions, reach out to me. You have my email, you have my phone number. I'm happy to Zoom with you. I'm happy to come early or late, whatever you need to get you through this class. So just let me know and have a good week. Thanks.